Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Lookout. I'm going to do a quick update on the Boise Fire in Orleans, California. If you're just joining us, this is the Lookout, and we do wildfire intelligence and try to create some context for fire management on large fires in Northern California. My name is Zeke Lunder. Our sponsor today is QTAC. QTAC makes wildland firefighting equipment. And they also are big supporters of the Good Fire movement of helping empower landowners to take control of their own fuels management and prescribed burning. And we appreciate their support. So we've got infrared from last night on the Boise Fire. And last night's mapping also shows that they're starting to call some of this stuff contained. Black line on the map. This edge of the fire here hasn't really spread materially for 3 days since the day before yesterday. And the new growth on the fire yesterday, so we're looking at town of Orleans here, Wichita down here, Forks of Salmon over here. So no new growth on the kind of northwest side of the fire. The white line is fire perimeter from yesterday for 24 hours of growth. So little island out here, this got fired after the fire made its main run up here, and this has kind of just been filling in. So no new growth down the whole western flank. They fired along this road system several days ago, and that's been holding. There's kind of a combination of dozer line and hand line. And this road's been holding. And then we saw yesterday, it was showing that they dropped some fire down this ridge. And so we're looking kind of to the east here. And the fire's backing down to this road system. Fire made a little run out of this branch of the, not sure what, I think it's Red Cap Creek. Let me pull up the topo. Yeah, so North Fork of Red Cap Creek, and it's one of the little branches of it, and the fire ran up out of there. So that little run, still kind of within the box here. The box that they're looking at is this road. This road's being prepped. We've talked about before how it's hard to hold fires on mid-slope roads, but right now the conditions are really favorable. Might even get some rain today. So this run up out of here is kind of what we expected, and not a huge concern. This isn't going to be a cakewalk holding this mid-slope road, but with the conditions we got right now, it's fairly likely to succeed. South end of the fire, there's been some firing done along the margins and the fire lines from 2020 Red Salmon Complex, which is shown here in dark blue. And so the big kind of uncontrolled part of the fire now is in the 2013 burn scar, the Butler Fire, kind of above Butler Creek and Forks of Salmon. So there was some action over here yesterday as we look back kind of to the west. This run kind of squirted out a couple days ago, and there's been kind of some runs back uphill. So like the fire back down into this drainage here, which is an unnamed tributary to Granite Creek, and ran up out of Granite Creek back towards the top of the ridge, which isn't really a control problem. This area here did not burn in 2013. And so and then this area here also didn't burn in 2013. But I think it might have burned in Perch. Let's see if we can turn on the Perch fire. Right here. For some reason we're not showing the Perch fire in this. All right. So yeah, some little kind of slope-driven runs back up and out towards the ridge between Orleans Mountain and the south. That's about it on perch. We expect it's going to kind of continue slowly backing down Granite Creek and maybe even Butler Creek. This area up here off the south or off the northeast side of Orleans Mountain hasn't spread much in the last 24 hours. And there's some proposals, and I don't know what the progress is, to build hand line down to Nordheimer Bar, which I don't have on this map. I want to point you to our website. Where we've got summaries. This one by Ryan Stevens. We've got kind of all of our other reports on the Boise Fire, and we've got reports on a lot on the Park Fire, and it's our archive. We've got a lot of interviews and other stuff on here. So check out our website for. Oftentimes we'll update that if we don't have time to do a live stream. And today's ops map. Bob Fraser says today's going to be a big red flag for Southern Oregon, having lightning in Southern Oregon. All right. Thanks for the heads up, Bob. So as far as black on the map, meaning that they're comfortable it's holding. This dozer line that got fired down off the ridge several days ago that hasn't moved, and then the hand line all the way around this side here. They're not showing this as all black yet, but this hasn't moved for a couple days. And then the hand line all the way back to the kind of the origin of the fire. They're showing as black. This dozer line and hand line out to the east is still shown as proposed on the map. They haven't necessarily started it yet. And they're also showing proposed hand line out north along fire lines that were opened up in the Perch Fire. Coming back to the Google. That's about all we got to say on the maps themselves. Since Bob mentioned the fire hazard in the North Coast, let's look at the forecast for today. An 87% chance of probability. We've got a minimum RH of 50, so they're like solidly in this territory where their fires, backing fires, are barely going to be burning under these conditions unless there's a lot of heavy fuel. Like if you have fine fuel like ferns and not a lot of heavy fuel that's creating heat at this humidity and temperature, it can be hard to get your fire to really burn with the effects you want. The fuels are dry, so fuels are gonna burn. But as far as like new starts or explosive growth, unless you've got wind and slope aligned, these environmental conditions right now are really mild. Tomorrow the max humidity is supposed to be 90%, minimum of 37. So as I said before, we're in kind of pretty solid, good prescribed burn conditions. And it's just want to remind people that it's possible for that to happen in August. We think of August as being pure hell, fire season, everything gets destroyed. But we can have these windows right in the middle of the summer where you've got really fairly mild burning conditions, and that a lot of the fire effects we get during this time, these windows, one, are a time that we contain major fires that have been beyond our control, and two, are windows where oftentimes we get beneficial effects from fires that are burning freely in areas we can't suppress. So I'll be curious to see what we get with precip. One thing that's kind of lucky right now on this fire is that they're not in the midst of big indirect firing operations. Because as we saw last year, if they were trying to say, if they had lost control of it here and they were trying to do a big burnout along this ridge system, under the conditions they've got right now, it'd be difficult for them to get their fire. It might be hard for them to get the fire to grow, to their backfire, to actually burn with enough consumption and depth to be secure. And especially if you get a little rain, it can really throw a monkey wrench into like a longer range plan. It's like, okay, we're going to fire this road system in anticipation of the fire being here in a week. And we saw that last year on the Smith River complex. They had this big indirect box that they built, and then it rained, and they couldn't get any of that stuff to really burn. And so then you're left with this kind of smoldering fire out here, this ragged, partial burn that you started, and then you're vulnerable to kind of future big wind events and the fire waking back up, and you having kind of created a mess here of kind of incomplete burn. So luckily for this fire, it's like they're not in the midst of big indirect firefighting operations that are going to be made difficult by this potential precip. What we're going to do, I want to look real quick at kind of a 7-day forecast. Also, this website here, it's called NorthOps Coordination Center. It's news and notes. It's kind of the running blog for the Coordination Center, the kind of the Fire Dispatch Center for Northern California. It's a great source. So if you check out gac.ifc.gov, they've got one for every coordination center in the country, and they're a great clearinghouse for fire-related intel. So if we come to this site and look at the outlooks, they'll give you a 7-day outlook, and it'll show you like, hey, for today, we've got forecast for winds in the northeast part of the state. The coast is not super burnable, and these other areas that are yellow are dry, but no triggers for high hazard conditions. Up here in Oregon, we got this big high risk trigger. I'm not sure what B stands for. We see for today we got these wind advisories, but then we're just dry and no big triggers. So when you look for is like these yellow and red warnings, and you see like the Bay Area and Marine area, like down here, like no high fire hazard conditions for the next week in the North Coast or the North Bay. And then they have a nice summary. High risk in central and eastern areas due to strong winds and low RH. Abundant wet lightning across the Northwest Mountains with isolated drier strikes across northern mountains today. High risk in the far east due to gusty west winds and very low RH. And that's happening all the way across Nevada. Potential problems today are gusty south and southwest winds, 25 to 35 miles an hour across Sac Valley and east side. So it's going to be really windy and things are dry. But that's less of an issue for Boise because it's going to be wet and probably get rained on. Anyway, this is a good place to go and look at your outlooks. You can check out the summary, say, here for the Pacific Northwest. Southeast Oregon, the humidity's low, and you also have potential for thunderstorms. Anyway, these are good sites, the GACs. Other things that are great here at NorthOps are, if you look at the intelligence, you can see a situation report that gives you some detailed summaries on each fire. It tells you like by county, etc., who's got it's statistics, but then usually down here they've got detailed summaries. Where are they at for the active fires? So here, like they'll give you a detailed summary of like what's happening on the Crozier Fire or the Park Fire, the Boise Fire. And this is nice because it gives you a list of how many resources of each type. So you can see that like on Boise right now, we've got 14 hotshot crews, 0 private crews. All the private crews are on Park. No, just kidding. We've got 3 private crews. Type 2 crew is a hand crew of 20 people that's not that doesn't have the fireline leadership qualifications of a hotshot crew. So a hotshot crew, they've got to have squad bosses, meaning that you can take a 20-person crew. You've got 4 squad boss qualified people that can break that crew into 5 or 4 squads of 5 that have qualified leadership. So if you have spot fires or firing operation, you can maintain oversight. You don't just have 20 people running around in the woods and one person trying to figure out where they all are. That one person can talk to their 4 squad bosses and keep accountability for other people. So the difference between the Type 1 and Type 2 crew is the Type 1 crews have to kind of maintain a roster of qualified squad bosses, and they also have to kind of maintain a higher standard of kind of physical fitness. Type 2 IA crews is basically really similar to a hotshot crew in that, and those are usually, there's private contracting crews that are Type 2 IA, and those crews also have to maintain qualified squad bosses and squad leadership. And then Type 2 crew, that's not a Type 2 IA crew, is kind of just, oftentimes in the past, a national forest would like pull together the people from timber and wildlife and all their qualified basic firefighter 2s and make a crew, and firefighter 2 crew doesn't have to have as many squad bosses that are qualified. Boise's got 7 Type 1 helicopters, which is a lot for a fire this size. It's got 4 Type 2 helicopters, which are not quite as heavy, and it's got 3. So I mean that's a lot. That's 14 helicopters for a fire that's 10,000 acres. And then they've got a bunch of engines and then an overhead team. So anyway, this is a good place to go. It gives you kind of a little bit of a vision of what they're trying to do. You see, they got 1,700 people working on Boise. Is that true? No, I don't think so. 1,000 people. I don't see anything in here for Park. I think that's because Park's being run by Cal Fire, not feds. All right. What's interesting in here is they give you cost to date. So the Gold Fire that's happening up in the Plumas cost $12 million for a 3,000 acre fire. So that's $4,000 an acre. I think it's all as useful. It's not quite apples to oranges, but when you look at $4,000 an acre spent on putting out this fire, like, well, what could we do with $4,000 an acre as far as treating it before the fire? Boise, the Hill Fire here burned 7,000 acres, and they've spent $42 million on it. So that's $6,000 per acre. And Crozier spent $27 million on a 2,000 acre fire. So that's $13,000 per acre. Like, you could go out there and like hand stack every stick in Crozier with contract crews for the cost for the $27 million. Boise so far $10 million for 10,000, so only $1,000 per acre. But if you think of what you could do with $10 million in fireproofing Orleans, so you could let fires like Boise burn and pick them up at the edge of town. It's all really expensive. Nothing here on Park Fire, but another good resource for this kind of statistics is the National Situation Report. This is kind of a more meta scale national view of what's going on with fires. The Pacific Northwest has burned 1 million acres. It gives you great summaries. Northern California's burned 450,000 acres, and 430,000 of that's park. So I think one thing that's worth talking about is just that we have had one big fire in Northern California, really really big fire. But that other than that, it's really slow, right? Like all in all, this is a slow fire season for Northern California. It doesn't feel like it in Butte County because we burned 400,000 acres. But other than that, like the number of starts and the total acres burned that aren't in the park fire is pretty minimal. I know it doesn't feel like that if you're in the midst of it. So a lot of fires in Oregon and Washington. But we'll come down to Northern California. $216 million spent on the park fire. 27 on Crozier, 10 on Boise. They don't give you a lot of detail in this one, but this is a good place to look just to see like what's happening nationally. So I'll put that in the chat too. You can add that to your fire bookmarks. All right, we're going to look at real quick, see if there's new imagery for Boise. I'm curious about the fire severity in Boise. This is a website called Sentinel. Well, it's a website from the European Space Agency, and it's a good place to find satellite imagery that's fresh. And so we're just going to look at this kind of infrared and see if we can see through the smoke and see what happened on the Boise, because we were curious about the severity, right? And that big run that we had earlier this week, if it really roasted, if it completely just fried Boise, North Fork of Boise Creek. So let's see. Choke it a little with, we're asking it for a lot. Did an interview yesterday with a woman named Cameron Musser, who's a forester, and we'll have a summary of that up on the website soon. You know, what we try to do here is we're trying to talk to a lot of different people and engage in all the different aspects of kind of forestry and land management. So just a little heads up. So yeah, it's a little hard to tell through the smoke and with this abstract imagery, but you see this this blue in here. Some of the trees in this run may have survived. It's not, clearly the upper slopes really cooked off. And down in the bottom here, it looks like there's still going to be some green vegetation, some living trees down in the streamside corridors of this fire. It's, as hot as it cooked off, it's hard to believe that anything would survive. But it's hard to tell when things like that are happening, really exactly where all the action is. So this is from the 14th, so from Thursday. And you can see the fire flanking off to the side after the big run. But these infrared images are always interesting because they show you that like the fire oftentimes isn't just like one big line of fire marching across the landscape. There's places it's hot, there's places it's cold, there's places that it's out. So looking up Boise Creek, you can see that kind of the origin here, the fire kind of started with a run up the hill. And that this whole side that we've been saying has been cooling off. It doesn't show any heat at all here back on Thursday. So just as a kind of reference, we talk about severity and kind of the overall damage caused by the fire. Let's just see if we can look at see if there's smoke or not. There's a different slicing and dicing of this image that helps show the severity of how, like, where there's still green vegetation. You see us use this quite a bit. So kick this out as Google Earth file. You can see that a lot of the area inside the burn actually is not roasted. Still waiting for it to download here. Second here. Right, so there you go. Here's your fire perimeter in red, and stuff in green still has a canopy. So you can see that the bulk of the center of Boise it's not going to kill all the trees. And like probably 70% of the area burned by Boise Fire so far is still going to have forest on it, still have green trees. And then you've got these kind of pockets of high severity where the fire really cooked. And this is common, but especially in the fire suppression era, that we've had extreme fuel loading in this basin and no fires for 100 years. So we expect that you're going to have a high severity fire. And so you can see that the fire, once it got established on these south facing slopes, it made these big slope driven runs, but that some of the area in the bottom may have been spared. You know, like the radiant heat and everything else, a lot of these trees may die. But as it is right now, there's still kind of standing green trees, even in the areas, lower slope areas of what burned hot. And then also the fire, though it made kind of some initial slope-driven runs, a lot of it's been backing slowly. And that's kind of some of the thinking with like lighting over here on the hill and letting it back down is they could, and maybe, 30 years ago, they might have just lit this road to secure this edge. But there's a lot more interest now in letting fire back down where you can to maximize the beneficial effects of the fire. So what else was I going to say here? If you look at, what we talk about a lot here is oftentimes we look at high severity and we think like this red is all bad and that it was just purely destructive. And often if you look back at the vegetation before, you'll see that there's places where the high severity was in like brush fields. So a lot of this looks like it was timber that burned hot. But you'll see down in here, there's a lot of brush mixed in, and like over here, there's a lot of brush. And brush generally burns with high severity. So like if you hear that a fire is like 60% high severity, it's always worth asking, like, well, what was the veg? Because there's this assumption that high severity fire is a bad thing ecologically, and we don't want to have high severity fire that kills all our big old trees. But like when you have a patch of high severity here in what was largely a brush field, it's really just natural. And it's like it's not the end of the world. And what we see on this Butler Creek side of the fire is not a lot because it's smoky, but the pre-fire condition of a lot of this area over here that's burning is this kind of patchy brushlands that have burned hot a lot in the future, and that's kind of poorer soil quality over here. So if we see high severity in these brush fields, the way that the severity gets mapped by the satellite is kind of biased towards showing high severity in brush because it's based on a change in kind of the red light and the infrared light that's reflected by the imagery. So they look at the pre-fire imagery versus the post-fire imagery, and they analyze the relationship in the kind of red and infrared light pre and post-fire to figure out how much green canopy was lost. So it's kind of biased. Like brush almost always maps as higher severity, just because of both the way it burns, but also just the process that is used to delineate this stuff. Okay, I think we'll cut it off there. Good morning, folks. Hoping to get out in the field on Monday on the park fire to look at fire severity, and so depending on the schedule, we may not have live streams next few nights. I want to direct you to the website. If you're jonesing for some live streams and we're not up, come in here and check out our like fire education stuff tagged with fire education. And oftentimes this will be a talk about a fire that's in progress, but we tag stuff where there's kind of an educational component. You might watch, especially look at the stuff from like last year, the 2022 fires, water firing operations, talking to Will Harling about fires. There's a lot of stuff in here that you might even just skip through, like, oh, here's the update on, like XYZ fire. This one here, for example, we started off talking about a specific fire.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Lookout.
But we end up talking about like what we were talking about today of how rain can screw up your plan for an indirect. Someone says, can you add links to the description? Which description are you talking about, Gerbot? All right. And then the last thing is we've got the Lookout webpage on Facebook. And I really don't like Facebook at all. But if you follow the Lookout page, it's a good spot to get our live stream updates and other stuff. Oh, all right. This person says they don't think the live comments are viewable later. Cool. Will do. See you guys.